Welcome back to episode...
No, I will not have this. This can be in the podcast. I don't care. Welcome, fellow travelers. Okay. This is my podcast that I share as a partner with Ned Pruitt. I am Russell the human.
And I'm Ned the pissed off human.
No, I'm pissed off. You tried to take... You were like, oh yeah, last episode. Let's switch off one episode at a time.
Start over. Do your thing.
No.
Man.
I already did it. I already started. We're going. This is canon. This is super canon right now. Y'all, this is the Treetrunks episode. If you listen to season 1, episode 1, the first episode of the Never Ending Adventure podcast, which you should have, this is, I mean, if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to the first episode, it's like 2 episodes ago. Go back.
Listen to it, you goof.
Yeah. This is the episode about Treetrunks, which I was super pumped about her hot buns in the first episode. I don't want to spoil my thoughts on Treetrunks just yet. And by that I mean, I feel really weird about Treetrunks after this episode.
Yeah, that's me popping a beer because we are about to talk about cartoons and sexuality, and sometimes it's going to get a little uncomfortable. So
no, I'm mad again. You took my start. You're interrupting the audio for our podcast with the PABs.
Crisp, cold PBR.
No, and we all know that PBR stands for PABs, bitten by rattlesnakes. It's not a real sponsor. It's we just happen to have the drink in front of us. Man, let's go into it.
We open up on a peaceful little field, a lovely little home in the middle of an apple orchard.
Yeah, they're talking about apple pies.
Jake and Finn are just playing around, messing with swords, being crazy. And then, sweet homie little Treetrunks, who is a small little pygmy elephant, comes in and she's like...
She's almost great for merchandising. And then they made her not cute.
But then comes in and she has got the sweet home, grandma-ly voice, baking apple pies. So off the bat, emotionally, we're feeling like this is going to grandma's house. So I think I'm taking it from the child's perspective of, and don't get me wrong, I love Treetrunks. I love the character. Voice acting is absolutely genius, but it just throws you off that all of a sudden she's like, I'm the sweetest, sexiest adventurer of them all.
Oh, let me go seduce him. I want to go seduce this monster that's about to kill us.
But the funniest thing is, it's almost like Treetrunks tries to be sexual, but it's like somebody being, I'm going to be sexual, but they have never been told the definition of being sexual at all.
No,
it's bizarre.
What I'm discerning is essentially nobody in this world truly is mentally stable. Everybody is totally just off the rocker in one way or another. I mean, Finn has the excuse of being 12, and that's fine. But what's Jake's excuse? And, Jake I guess he's a dog, technically. So dogs are just no matter what, they love their human. And Jake's human is Finn. But other than that, man, everybody else in this show is just, my perspective is changing from the pacing and the comedy in this show for me when I was in high school was too fast, was too joke. What I'm realizing is everybody in the show is just nuts. And it fits because that's how the characters are. Maybe my perspective will change as we continue.
Yeah, well, I don't think you are wrong in that sense at all. That everybody, and maybe that's a commentary on the world, is that everybody's some level of their own crazy. Everybody is their own level of their own just freaking wackadoo, you know. But that's good. It means that we have really fun friends, and we can go to Malo tea parties, and we can bake apple pies together, even if you're, batshit crazy.
Well, it's also one of those things where, I don't know. It fits into the show. I keep saying podcast. I get those confused.
This is the real world, Russell, and we're doing a podcast.
If you listen to the last episode, you may recognize that this could potentially be 2 episodes recorded in a day. And I might be losing it a little bit at this point. The snail sighting from last episode, I feel like we need to talk about this at some point. Maybe Ice King, we didn't mention it. In the prison, he was right next to one of the princesses on, I guess not on anything. I was thinking of this episode. He's on a picnic blanket. I finally saw him. It took me 4 episodes of the show. Finally saw the snail. He's on the picnic blanket while they're in the dark, evil forest.
It's so fun when you can catch the snail organically and you don't have to backtrack to figure out where he is.
Yeah. Also, Ned, if you could do anything, what would you do?
If I could do anything, what would I do? Because
that seems to be the question that is asked of our adventures in this episode, including Treetrunks.
Yeah, I think I would just, quit and travel. I mean, that's like such a basic answer. I would either quit and travel, or I would...
Are you talking about quitting this podcast?
Yeah.
You can't quit this podcast on me.
I got to travel.
Just started.
I got to travel down to Taco Bell and get some Taco Bell,
Oh, man, I'm so jealous right now of your... the brand placement. This is not a sponsored episode.
No, Taco Bell's just that good.
Yeah, it is just that good. They're grade D meat or whatever they are now. They did go healthy recently.
Oh, yeah.
But in Nashville, you can't get baked beans at certain Taco Bells, and it makes me mad.
But regardless, that's such a basic answer.
Yeah.
I think I'd want to travel. I mean, spot on. Maybe if I gave it a good half hour thinking, I could think about like, oh yeah, actually, if I was presented that, I would
anything.
Do that.
You could do anything. I guess that does time matter? I mean, in this show, they decide that they want to go after apple pies. They want to go after apples, and it's from Treetrunks. And when she says it, Finn's initial response is like, "Oh, that's lame.
That's super lame."
Like,
Yeah,
you really want to? You do that every day. Why do you want to go after apples? So I was thinking, man, like, could you do literally? If you could do literally anything, like, what would you want to do? I'd love to be a rock star. Get me on that life.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be a cool. Maybe even if take some, like, to your note, take some time off, go to Japan. Maybe explore the countryside a little bit.
Yeah,
it'd be dope. You're letting y'all know a little bit about us as we go.
You say, what do we want to do? We want to never stop adventuring.
We want to adventure.
That's what we want to do.
It's true. It's true. And adventure kind of in a more literal sense than what we're doing right now. Because again, this podcast, Never Ending Adventure, your life is an adventure. Our lives are adventures in their own way. And I hope every day, my goal when I first moved up to Nashville was to constantly be getting outside of my comfort zone. And I hope you all feel the same way. I think it's a great way to grow. Mm-hmm. If you aren't doing that, and right now it's not a great time to do it, and I don't want to go on a tangent.
Adventure safely. Maybe that's our hashtag for the episode.
Adventure safely right now. But get outside of your comfort zone when you can. It's a great way to personally grow. Or go for apples. And don't listen to your friends when they shut you down. Say, no, well, there's something really cool about this apple. It's like the apple. It's a crystal apple or whatever. And they get going. They get moving on it. And I think Jake encourages Finn, hey, like, let's see this through. Like, this is her dream. Maybe there's something cool to this. And they get going into the dark, evil forest.
The evil forest.
Yeah. Which is a really cool setting. We're introduced to no other major characters that I know of at this moment. There's some really freaking cool characters in this episode, including a crystal monster that copies who you are and what you're doing. And because they're made out of crystal, they can thwart you in so many different ways. I mean, it reminded me so much of like Samurai Jack. There's a really fantastic episode of Samurai Jack where he faces himself. And this is kind of a, TV show, movie trope, but he faces himself and has to overcome himself or his shadow self or whatever, and Finn and Jake get to do that later on in this episode. But they get adventuring into the forest, and we get to see the better side of Treetrunks, the more whimsical, kind of mindless, kind of just exploring whatever side of Treetrunks.
Yeah, and that's the funniest thing is that she obviously stumbles into areas where she is potentially in danger. She has no idea whatsoever that she's in danger, and I love that it's even though she's portrayed as this older lady, that she has this childlike wonder in the evil forest, no fear going in, absolutely. Nothing to be afraid of, and that spurs one of my favorite lines, top favorite lines of the show, I would say.
Wow.
Is when she's like, "Here's a rainbow sticker, and here's a scratch and sniff sticker. Smells like a pickle."
Why does she have that?
It's just wonderful.
So
if I had a little small elephant as a friend that carried around a picnic basket, I hope that there would be scratch and sniff stickers in that picnic basket.
It's right before. So it's this flesh monster.
Oh, and it's just gross.
You missed my favorite part of the episode, though. Like, you just went right past it. I love Jake's response when he sees this flesh monster. He decides to do what looks like one of those weird, overly sexual. I guess this is our sexual episode, most sexual episode of the podcast so far. One of those things at the gym that a lot of times you see girls doing. Sometimes you'll see a dude doing where they use a medicine ball and they're thrusting into the air. Jake is doing that on the mushy flesh monster, just thinking it's like a bounce pad, and it is disturbing. I mean,
yeah, it's literally just flesh, and then when they finally
it's
beat
sticking to him too. It's sticking to his butt.
It's weird. Molds and goes into the trunk of a tree. And I mean, if it's just if you're any sort of person that gets cringed by creepy, weird texture things, that is not the monster you would want to encounter in an enchanted evil forest. It's gross.
Yeah, not at all. And Treetrunks is just kind of oblivious. I'm kind of thinking she just doesn't have the mental capabilities or intellectual capabilities of really processing what's going on around her. But at the same time, sometimes she just turns on this sexual, sensual nature that works for her, I guess. Not to
it
me,
works
but
for
to
her,
Jake.
but it's bananas because, like I said, we turn from this innocence and this. She's all of a sudden lackadaisical about monsters in the forest, but then she's like, "Oh, now I'm a sexy adventurer." You're like that. Well, we just went from one end of a spectrum to another, so it's just super bizarre. But again, it's weird that Jake is into it, but I guess she's just legendary for being a sexy elephant with delicious apple pies, and they can't miss out on this opportunity adventure with her.
Man, I've got. Treetrunks reminds me of someone I met while I was working in pest control in Atlanta that I think I'm just going to tease at. I don't think I can actually ever say who this is or what the situation was, but there was a lovely old woman who came up to me while I was spraying for cockroaches at a really gross apartment building in downtown Atlanta for my family's pest control company. And Treetrunks reminds me of this exotic dancer that I met at that apartment complex. And just everything from the way she talks to who's the sensual, out of nowhere, I'm going to go seduce this monster and it's going to work. This is what I need to do. Man, that was a weird experience for a high schooler.
That sounds not. That sounds like something that was maybe suppressed until this podcast.
It might have been. I actually we were treating for bed bugs. Anyways, I've got a photo from it that I look at sometimes.
If you go down into the description below, we will not be linking that picture in the description below.
Nor the entire documentary about that woman's life that I met. She was a famous person. Crazy.
No. Let's move on. Let's get back in there. Amazing part. I mean, before we have our break and have a word from our sponsors, I do want to be in terms of cartoons, in terms of kids shows, I grew up in probably something I watched 1,000 times growing up was Alice in Wonderland. And the evil forest, from the sign monsters, from the interesting little butterfly creatures, to there being an innocent character in a dark, terrifying forest, I just got major Alice in Wonderland vibes from this. So I would imagine that because of the creepy trees, the monsters, the inspired skeleton butterflies, the illustrators, I feel like, of this episode had to have been a little inspired by Alice in Wonderland, right?
I don't doubt that for a second. And it's been a long time since I've kind of gone down that rabbit hole.
Aha.
Got it. With Alice in Wonderland, maybe not if I can remember that. But I totally agree. Have you seen the like, wasn't, man, what's his face? The
Johnny Depp
Johnny
one.
Depp. Yeah.
It's been a while.
Was it good?
No.
No? All right. Not Never Ending Adventure, NEA approved.
No, not approved.
Let's go ahead and take that. NEA means Never Ending Adventure. I haven't seen it anywhere else on the web, the interwebs. I think we're good.
I think we're okay. We will we'll coin that until someone shuts us down. But that's a great time to segment into a word from our sponsors.
Speaking of coining that, let's do it.
Coin it. Today's episode is brought to you by Evil Forest Candy Co. and their all-new Strawberry Crystal Crunchies candy corn. With all the sweet flavors you know and love from your childhood growing up in the Evil Forest, these crunchies will bring you back to a state of nostalgia and traumatizing terror that only the Evil Forest can provide. So go on out and buy yourself a bushel of Strawberry Crystal Crunchies candy corn. Warning, Strawberry Crystal Crunchies are not responsible for any allergic reactions, swollen throat, horrific nightmares, getting jacked up by Crystal Guardians, and cannot and will not bring you back if you are teleported to the Crystal Dimension unexpectedly. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening to our sponsors. I know that the Evil Forest Candy Co. puts out some wonderfully terrifying candies and everything like that. So please, if you are not from the Evil Forest, do not buy their products. But back to the episode. Yeah. I know we kind of left off right where Treetrunks was trying to seduce the evil tentacle crystal monster Finn.
She got all made up for it and everything. She was ready to go.
Yeah, she must have had makeup in her picnic basket somewhere.
She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of. She has an idea of what she's doing, and then the follow through is kind of hit or miss depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And was that right before or after Jake? We see Jake just covered in kisses.
That was right afterwards.
Afterwards.
She gets all made up, and then Jake is supposed to be watching over her while Finn fights this guardian with his sword, or I guess he's another different type of crystal guardian. But
and if you hadn't noticed it by now, I mean, it's basically, and it doesn't work out here, but she's adventuring in her own way. She's moving on. She's going, I want to go after this crystal apple. I want to go to this forest, even if there is danger. I'm going to take on this flesh monster with stickers, as you mentioned earlier. I'm going to seduce this monster. I'm going to have a tea party with these sign zombies. She has her own way of doing things. It doesn't always pan out great. Thank goodness she has Finn and Jake, Jake being super OP with her. But she's definitely giving it her all in her own way.
And you know what? I'm glad you bring that up, because even at the end of the show, when they fight the Crystal Guardian and Finn goes about it in the same way we've seen in every episode, he has gone sword swinging, guns blazing, rage face, Leroy Jenkins.
Yep.
And he would not have been able to defeat actually anybody in this episode if it weren't for her. She is distracting the flesh monster with the stickers, so Finn's actually able to get a sword and cut off the flesh monster's arm. She distracts the snake monster, and it turns around to look at Treetrunks, and that's how the only way Finn sees the giant crystal that is the weak point. And then the Crystal Guardian, he goes, okay, finally, I've been getting jacked up the whole time in the Crystal Forest. Let's embrace the way she adventures. So I think it's a great point of maturity for Finn in the show to realize that there's a lot of people out there in the world that are different than him. There's a lot of people that don't operate the same way as he does, and he gets really, really frustrated when they don't at first, and then learns lessons and goes, you know what? I accept the way you adventure, and I'm willing to try things your way,
And that's fascinating, because in Finn's case, I mean, from what we've seen so far, it's all about his environment. His environment has proven to him, this is how you should act. I mean, whether there are deeper implications that the writers were trying to make or not, who knows? But it is really fascinating to see that he does grow. And I think it's, like you said, it's probably just his age. He's probably, he's 12 years old. He's figuring out he's going on these crazy adventures. He's just diving straight in with the sword. And then he's observing and he's learning. If he wasn't learning, it would be really frustrating to be a viewer at this point. But he's figuring it out based off of his environment. And that is super cool to see. And the crystal monster was fantastic. I mean, I mentioned earlier, it reminded me of Samurai Jack. In some ways, it reminds me of Luke Skywalker in the forest with Yoda when he faces Vader. It's facing this dark force. It isn't a straight copy. It's not like it's two individuals of Shadow Finn and Shadow Jake, but it's a crystal that copies exactly what they do and are aggressive in the way that they're aggressive toward it. Mm-hmm. And then they end up beating it by kind of just out-nicing it. Yeah. Hey, is it cool if Treetrunks, takes a bite out of the apple? And then Jake kind of does the little, oh, I'm an idiot or whatever thing.
Yeah, and I'm stupid.
I love that.
Tossing that little joke. So even at the end, it's very much Jake's character showing through. And that's how they get the crystal apple. And before I go too far into my thought process, we can get to the very end of the episode is ridiculous. She takes a bite of the apple and explodes.
She didn't look happy either.
No.
The face, right before she gets eaten, she has such a depressed face, and it's terrifying. It's just 1 or 2 seconds of frowning and then exploding.
Yeah. And
then just she walks for a half second in a crystal kingdom, maybe. I was so confused.
So that is something that I read into. They actually had to add that clip that seemed very inappropriately placed at the end of the episode. There was a blip, almost like it started the theme song, and then they show her walking in what's called the crystal dimension.
For not even long enough for it to really register.
Exactly. But they actually aired this episode first without that ending. Where you see that she's not dead. And apparently Cartoon Network kind of came under some fire because it was very upsetting. And people were the feedback was, we cannot run this episode that Treetrunks just exploded and leave it at that. Because the other, gosh darn, probably the other 3 episodes have all ended in such a happy note. People dancing. We escaped the Ice King's clutches. We beat Lumpy Space. And this is the first episode where you think it's going to end happy and it just doesn't. And so they had to at least give you a little flavor that we haven't seen the last of Treetrunks. Thank goodness.
I'm glad they did, because I would have been pretty bummed out had I feel very on the fence with Treetrunks, but I think she does a lot more good than she does harm. I think she, despite her kind of too muchness, has a lot to offer to the show as a crazy dynamic, crazy different character from the other characters that we already have.
Yeah,
I'm
happy
to hear she's alive.
She comes out the gates every episode just with a whole new level of shenanigans. You realize that she's been married 3 times. You realize that she actually doesn't consider Princess Bubblegum to be the true ruler of the Candy Kingdom. She still considers King of Ooh to be the true ruler of Ooh. And so these are not spoiler drops. These are just things that you can spoiler drop.
Spoiler drop. We got can I get an spoiler drop?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Man, yeah, that's way over my head.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna try and forget every word. I couldn't
end this episode without saying that Treetrunks just ends up with so many extra stories. She adopts an evil demon baby basically down the road. All wonderful things to be expecting from her. So go with your gut feeling of I don't know whether or not to like her or not. It's gonna get great later. And I've probably, everybody on the podcast is probably sick and tired of me saying that, but literally in these first 4 episodes we have got.
You did say the first season is rough.
Yeah,
it's been okay. I've been enjoying it.
It's good.
I'm
It's
really
good.
pumped.
That's
I'm really
awesome.
excited.
It just kind of it's always hard to get through a show like this when you don't feel like any of the episodes connect. You don't really feel like we are creating a universe that is like you can walk from point A to point B because it just feels so random
But like
now.
you said, every great show has to introduce the main characters, and that's kind of what we're doing. One person that will not be impressed or excited after this episode is probably Lanny Ranicorn, because they're gonna have to talk about what happened.
We see
There's some
lots
smooching that happened.
We see lots happen through the show where Jake and Lady Ranicorn's relationship. Sometimes it's like the most important thing in his life, and then sometimes he just is like irresponsible, and it kind of makes you realize you're like, is Jake a bad dog? Are you a bad dog?
Bad dog. I always went on a bad dog living in a movie, but that's not even how the song goes. I love it. Let's go, man. My lesson for this episode. Sorry, I'm cracking myself up. An apple a day keeps the doctors away, but avoid all apples of any significance. If you've ever heard anything cool or special about the apple, don't touch it. Maybe just don't even eat apples. Maybe see your doctor once a year and just don't even touch apples because it's not worth your time.
Yeah, Treetrunks might be cooking up peach cobblers after this episode exclusively. Well, I think my lesson of the episode, I go a little like deep into this, and it kind of tangents off of something I was saying earlier that when we're going through life, we're doing our own adventures and everything like that, and when someone else comes in alongside us or they're having their own adventure, we tend to rip on them. We tend to be like, you're not doing this right. Hypothetically speaking, if say we've purchased a house, but somebody else is our same age and traveling the world, or maybe just it's like doing something else not in line with what you're doing. Our human nature has a tendency to defensively go, the way I adventure, the way I'm doing life, I want that to be right. I don't want to be proven that I'm wrong. And Finn does the same thing. Finn goes, I'm getting jacked up over here because you're not adventuring the way you're supposed to adventure. But at the end of the day, as soon as he opens his mind and accepts a different, perspective on how to take on challenges in life, they achieve their end goal, and he doesn't get jacked up anymore. So I think that's my long-winded lesson of saying, if you encounter people that are doing things differently than you, and your guard goes up, just remember that like everybody adventures in their own way, and there are no wrong ways.
No, everybody has their own perspective on life, and also on what way they go about things, and their own journey, their own path to travel. Ned, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was actually almost exactly what I meant to bring up toward the end of this episode. I think you just crushed it. Crushed it. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our third episode. I am so excited. We don't really know what the response is yet, and we'll grow with you guys, man. Like, whatever we're going to call you guys, the travelers, whatever it is, y'all can call yourselves whatever you want.
Russell's lovelies.
You can all be my lovelies. That's a Game Grumps thing. I can't take lovelies from them.
Oh, no.
It hurts my soul. That's why I chose lovelies for characters in the episodes. But I'm so excited about this, you guys. Please, if you can, let's grow this crowd, this community. Follow us, review us on Apple Podcasts, and just generally everywhere you can. And let's do it. Let's go on this journey together.
Never stop adventuring. Oh, Treetrunks, my love, you are ever as sweet as your pies and yet far more sensual. I've got to say, pretty solid podcast coming from the boys this week. Little Ned still sounds like a big nerd, and Russell is like a little lost puppy. It's just silly. It just chases his tail around with his own thought. It's so funny. That being said, these little dorks love you guys and wish you the greatest of adventures. Never Ending Podcast was hosted by Nate Pruitt and Russell Tyndall and engineered by Michael Hitchcock. Until next time, we love you guys.